it's tough not to find someone better than Dak Prescott given the value and how late he is going in drafts. You pair him with a guy like CeeDee Lamb. If you have one of the early picks like you and I do, Field, do you think that there is a better wide receiver quarterback duo in fantasy football given their ADP and everything you can get from these two guys?
That last or second to last line is probably the most important part, right? Because Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown are a better fantasy duo, right? My second-ranked quarterback and my sixth-ranked wide receiver, as opposed to my seventh-ranked quarterback and my first-rated wide receiver being Dak and CeeDee. It's hard to go really wrong here, but the difference is, of course, you're getting Dak in a 10-team league in the 8th round, right? We just saw the data. Jalen Hurts is going in the 3rd round. You can get a comparable value because you know who finished just behind Jalen Hurts in fantasy points last year amongst quarterbacks?
Dak Prescott.
So you're getting a discount of 4 to 5 rounds on Dak. And, you know, Dak is one of those fascinating quarterbacks because there is no middle ground stance on Dak Prescott. You have to either believe that he is the worst and a choke artist in the playoffs and not worth the money, or you think the Cowboys are insane for not having a deal done yet. We're talking fantasy football, people, and the numbers support Dak. For the past 5 seasons, he's had 3 fully healthy years, one in which he missed 12 games. I think it was a thumb injury, and then one in which he missed 4. The year in which he missed 4, the numbers are comparable, but they're prorated, so I'm going to ditch those for just a moment. 3 full seasons in the past 5. This is the average for Dak. 4,300 passing yards. Good, right?
That's real good.
Elite.
That's nice.
34.3 passing touchdowns.
Anything over 30 is nice.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's like potentially leads the NFL good. 200 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Dak, you can debate him until the cows come home about other things, but in fantasy football, when he plays, he's a stud. And it's not like he's like, you know, slow and steady wins the race, Dak Prescott. It's he can carry your team for a month and a half. He did it last year.
Sure.
He was the best player in fantasy football.
Outlier, though. It was like nearly, 600 pass attempts, 590 pass attempts that propelled him into the top 3. Meanwhile, 3.2 rushing yards, QB 25 for rushing.
So you're not as in on Dak, you're saying.
I feel like I hear all the stats, and I'm not denying that he isn't an incredible duo and an incredible value, but we just talked about at the top of the show how rushing quarterbacks have such a higher floor, and yet 3.2 rushing yards per game, QB 25, that doesn't make me feel optimistic about...
Dak was down to 3.2 rushing yards per game last year?
Okay. I mean, maybe it's 30.2.
I don't think it's 30.2. I don't think it's 3 either. Maybe I've let me go check my numbers here.
We're gonna look at some stuff. While you guys are looking some stuff up, Stefania, I want to ask you this question. We've heard Adam Schefter talk back and forth a lot. Both of these guys are trying to pry the bag away from Jerry Jones right now. Sounds like one of them may be able to get it done. And when you look at this, is there any reason that you're concerned about either CeeDee Lamb or Dak Prescott in fantasy given the contract situations?
Not because of what Adam Schefter told us last night, what Field's been saying all along, which is that we expect the deal to get done with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about that, especially as we're approaching fantasy right now. Like, we have hesitations on Jamar Chase because of his situation, but CeeDee Lamb, we're all like ready to draft him as we expect this to get done. So I think the vote of confidence based on what they've been telling us is there. I just wanted to say for CeeDee Lamb, what's interesting to me, you know, a lot of there's feel too to this, right? And CeeDee Lamb to me doesn't feel like Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson because they feel to me like such big players. And CeeDee Lamb feels like volume, but that's the point, right? That's where Dak shines, and that's where CeeDee Lamb shines is in the volume. He is his target preference. And I don't know if you guys remember last year, the very start of the season, CeeDee Lamb was not happy.
Yeah.
Did not think he was getting thrown the ball enough.
Yeah.
Had some words with Dak. And do you remember what happened after that?
He got the ball enough.
The ball a lot.
Yes. And it exploded, and they were like, okay, this works. To me, that was just a really great example, too, of the kind of chemistry that they have, and that's not going to change. So yes, CeeDee Lamb will make the big plays, but I also think you benefit in these PPR formats from the volume. I think he will catch more passes, to Field's point about him potentially setting that record for receptions this year. The volume is going to earn you extra fantasy points.
Love that.
It was the rushing volume that I was wrong.
That's what I was just going to ask you, Liz.
Rushes, 14.2 rushing yards.
Okay.
QB 25 in rush attempts, QB 28 in rushing yards.
Oh, so
per
that's
game.
even worse. All right, so I should have just not fact checked.
You should have. Exactly.
I would just so maybe Dak is one of those outliers in the sense that the passing totals are so ridiculous that he can largely overcome it. We have seen Dak get scorching hot, though, on enough occasions that I'm digging it. Like, as amazing as CJ Stroud was last year in real life, for fantasy, relative to how he performed in real life, it was not quite as daunting. Remember, we had that spirited debate on the show last year with Kevin Pulsifer, the great Kevin Pulsifer, about CJ Stroud versus Patrick Mahomes.
I remember this.
And I want to say that Stroud ended up winning it.
You mean Daniel ended up winning it?
Daniel, yes. But it was like, not like either one of them. It was not like, hey, all of a sudden Stroud averaged 28 points per game and Mahomes was stuck at 17. It was like Stroud gets 18.2 and Mahomes gets 17.6. Remember that season in which Dak got hurt after week 4 or 5 when he was on pace to break every single passing record in NFL history? It was like he was on pace for 7,000 yards through 4.5 games. It was absurd. So I've seen it enough from Dak that the value of he and CeeDee Lamb, to me, is the most compelling quarterback wide receiver stack. If Jamar Chase had a contract, I would introduce Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, even with the concerns that Stefania has shared, just because, again, of how late Joe Burrow is going.
Love it, Field Yates. All right, that was Dynamic Duos presented by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV are the perfect pair for watching NFL games.
It's tough to find a more underrated duo than Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb when you consider their value, especially in fantasy drafts. If you've got an early pick, like many of us, pairing Dak with CeeDee could be the secret weapon that pushes your team over the top. But here's the real question: is there a better quarterback wide receiver duo in the NFL, especially in fantasy football? Sure, names like Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown come to mind. They are widely regarded as a superior fantasy duo. Hurts ranks as my 2nd overall quarterback, and Brown is my 6th wide receiver. Compare that to Dak, who is my 7th ranked QB, paired with the 1st rated wideout CeeDee Lamb. It's hard to go wrong with either combination, but here's the difference: Dak is going much later in drafts. In a 10-team league, you can snag Dak in the 8th round, whereas Hurts is going off the board in the 3rd. You're getting significant value with Dak. And let's be clear, Dak Prescott is one of the most polarizing quarterbacks in the NFL. You either think he's overpaid and can't perform in the playoffs, or you believe the Cowboys are out of their minds for not locking him down long term. But when we're talking fantasy football, the numbers tell the story. Over the past 5 seasons, Dak has had 3 fully healthy years, and in those years, he averaged 4,300 passing yards and 34 touchdowns. Those are elite numbers by any standard. In fantasy football, when Dak plays, he's a stud. He can carry your team for weeks at a time. Last year, even with less mobility, Dak was still dangerous. He attempted nearly 600 passes, propelling him into the top tier of quarterbacks. Yes, his rushing numbers aren't what they used to be. He's now QB25 in rushing, but his passing volume more than makes up for it. But let's talk about CeeDee Lamb. There's no denying he's a fantastic receiver, but how does he compare to other top-tier wideouts like Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson? Unlike those big play threats, Lamb thrives on volume. That's where Dak and CeeDee shine. Lamb is Prescott's primary target, and that connection results in massive volume. When Lamb wasn't happy with his target share at the start of last season, he spoke up. And what happened next? Dak made sure he got the ball, and Lamb's production exploded. That chemistry between Dak and CeeDee is what makes them such a dangerous duo. They're not just about flashy plays, they're about consistent, reliable production. Lamb may not always be the highlight reel guy like Hill or Jefferson, but his steady stream of targets, especially in PPR formats, makes him an invaluable fantasy asset. If Lamb continues on this path, don't be surprised if he sets new records for receptions this season. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the contract situations. With both Dak and CeeDee in negotiations for new deals, does that make them risky fantasy picks? Not at all. According to recent reports, all signs point to the Cowboys getting a deal done with Lamb. There's no real concern here. Lamb and Dak will continue to be the centerpieces of this offense. So is Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb the best QBWR duo in the NFL? They might not have the explosive, game-breaking ability of other duos like Hurts and Brown, But what they offer is consistency, volume, and chemistry. That's hard to beat. When it comes to fantasy football, that level of reliability can be the difference between winning your league and falling short. And in real life, the Cowboys' success hinges on this duo continuing to build on their connection. If Dak stays healthy and Lamb remains the focal point of the passing game, there's no reason why they can't be one of the top duos in the league this season.